Danny Asabgi is the CEO of Hudson Homes and is known in the industry for his leadership and innovation. Danny saw a gap in the construction industry for providing quality homes on time and on budget, which is why he started Hudson Homes. He wants his customers to have a rewarding experience while they build their dream homes. The philosophy behind Hudson Homes is to be a trustworthy builder that delivers on its promises. Danny, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
League or union?
It's a great question, isn't it? Because both my kids play union. I played union, but I have a passion for rugby league. I played rugby league, Commonwealth Bank Cup, when I was in year 12, year 11, year 12. And then I switched to union a few years later, but I'm going to say rugby league.
Which team, though? That's
It's got to be the St. George Dragons. There's no reason to laugh right now, but St. George Dragons that will be back. We'll be back.
We're Knights fans. We can't
that's
laugh.
right.
I know.
I think we're both down the bottom. Actually, I think you got us by what, 2? That was it.
I think we ended up on 10th or 11th.
Yeah, better than us. Put it that way. So, actually, talking numbers.
Yes.
You've always been a numbers man. Is that right? Or like as a kid growing up, you played footy, and was it numbers as well?
I think everything is numbers. I mean, my background, I was very strong in maths. I did a lot of the science subjects at school, but mathematics was a big thing for me, and I went on to study a commerce degree, very much left brain orientated, and I'm working on changing that to get a little bit more balance between left and right at the moment. But to me, numbers are the story of business. I mean, they tell you what's going on. They tell you your performance trends. They tell you your KPIs, what you need to look for. And in my opinion, the numbers are so non-subjective that it enables you to make an intelligent decision.
What would you like your right side of the brain to do more of for you?
Well, I'm actually working on quite a bit of that because I've never been artistic. I've never known how to draw. I've been very much left brain dominated, but I took a passion in photography a few years ago. So that kind of accessed the creative side. I like doing a little bit of furniture design, a little bit of woodworking. So little things like that just to try and trigger that right brain creativity.
Is that all hobby or are there some business benefits?
Well, it always starts as a hobby. And then the way my mind naturally works is it turns into a business. So I actually started a photography business. It was called Alex and Mark, which was named after my 2 young boys. Actually, it was named Alex before Alex was born. So the business name was Alex before Alex existed. But he was in the belly. He was in the tummy. So we knew he was coming out. But no, now these days it's purely for relaxation. It's purely for hobby.
So that's the creative side of the brain. But you are somebody that's always been able to create. So value creation, value recognition, that's another skill. Tell us about that because you've started a few businesses. You just talked about your photography business, but there's some other businesses at play that you've started from scratch. What are they?
Well, I've had a lot of businesses, and when my son turned 13 years of age, he was asking me about all the businesses that I had created. And I went to the effort of creating a Word document, and I cut and paste all the different logos of all the different businesses. So I've been in every single business, and up until last year, I used to say I've been involved in so many different industries except the food industry. But last year, I made a significant investment in a sandwich shop called Stacked. I was approached by a very good friend of mine who had a wonderful business concept. And my passion these days is I try and think back to where I was when I was 18 years old. So I set up my first business. Actually, set up my first business when I was at school. I had a passion for car stereos and car audio, and it was called Custom Car Tunes, as in tunes.
Well played.
And I used to install people's stereos on the weekends and build subwoofer boxes before it was even popular. And I had a real passion for that. And I've got to share a story with you that I reckon changed my life because at the age of 16, I wrote a letter to the Car Audio magazine editor in the US. I still remember his name was Mark Green. And I wrote a letter to him saying, listen, I'm a bright kid. I'm in year 12. I can go on to university and do whatever I want to do, but I have this passion for car audio. Now, I understand that as a car audio installer, my prospects aren't going to be as great as if I went on to university and did something else, but, passion. And he actually wrote back to me, and I still have a copy of the letter that I've scanned and I've laminated. And he basically said to me that he went on to university and got admitted to the bar before he decided that it wasn't for him, and he came back and became the editor of the Car Audio magazine. And his advice generally was, listen, just stay in school, get your degree and decide later. And it was a 2-page letter, so I'm summarising it very, very briefly. But I then studied, this was just before my trial HSC, and I was coming like second last in chemistry, and English wasn't too good, and all my subjects weren't great, but I knew it back to front. So I studied 6 weeks before my trial HSC, and I ended up almost topping every single subject. I actually got accused of cheating, so I had to sit down a few of the tests again, which I did not. And I went on to university, did a commerce degree, graduated with an accounting major and a law sub-major. And that letter, I'm going to say, really changed my life. Something as simple as that. And I've tried to track the guy down, but haven't been able to find him.
So how many companies was it? How many logos were on this Word document?
I'm going to say it's probably 20.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what's the most left field one? You got to tell us that.
The most left field. Well, the first one I started second one I started after Custom Car Tunes was a house cleaning franchise called Magic Maids. And the logo was off this pink fairy. So I'm going to say that's pretty far left field. And one of the first things I did when starting that business, it was a home cleaning business. And while I was studying at uni, I had a cadetship with an insolvency firm called Ferrier Hodgson. So being an insolvency firm, surprisingly, most of our biggest customers were builders going bust. But I started writing an operations manual about how to clean houses. And, you're talking about a guy who's lived at home. I've got an Egyptian
Hasn't cleaned his own house
I've
yet.
got an Egyptian mum who's looked after us, done everything from laundry to making our beds in the morning.
But you wrote the manual on how to clean a house.
And the manual was so specific. And I was talking to somebody the other day about how specific it was and how specific your procedures need to be to create a successful business. And I still remember writing that how you clean cornices and you hold the brush and you twirl in a clockwise direction as you're removing the cobwebs. And that business I started, and obviously 17 years old, I didn't have any money. Back then we used to have the CES, which was the Commonwealth Employment Service. So I couldn't advertise for any franchisees. So what I did instead is, talk about right brain now, is I advertised for a job at the local CES, advertising for cleaners. So cleaners would ring up, they'd want to come to the office for an interview. I'm not going to bring them to mum's house. So I'd say, listen, I'm going to come and see you. And they go, okay. So I'd turn up to an apartment in Warwick Farm or wherever it was, and I'd go to pitch them buying a business. Now, I didn't understand finance and that these people were unemployed. They couldn't get the $15,000 they needed to buy the finance. But after 35 presentations, I got my first yes. And that set the business up, and I ended up selling it 2 years later for $250,000. And I thought I was the richest 19-year-old in the world.
You probably were.
Yeah, you probably were at the
If
time.
you were doing that at 17 and other things before it, were you born an entrepreneur?
I think so. The only job I've ever had was working for Ferrier Hodgson. I've had a couple of minor part-time jobs, but that was the main role that I had, and that was something I did whilst I was at university. And I've never worked for anyone since, and much to my dad's disappointment at the time, because he was an accountant and he wanted me to go on down the path of accounting, and I had a great job at a great firm and
Working for the man every day.
You're going to
9
go
to
clean
5.
houses. But what I understood is that I knew how to build a business that cleaned houses. And it was the same thing when I started Hudson Homes. When I first wanted to start that, my wife said to me, "What do you know about building?" And it wasn't much, but I knew how to build a business that did the building. And I think that's one of the keys to being an entrepreneur. Actually, a really good lesson I learned from a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I'm not sure if you've read that, but if you haven't, any entrepreneur who's just about to start, I'm going to say that's the first book you should read. And the basic philosophy is this. If you're a hairdresser, most hairdressers think that they should operate a hairdressing business. Or if you're a mechanic, then you should operate a mechanic workshop. But what he says in his book is, if you're the hairdresser, go and open a mechanic workshop. Now, on the surface, that sounds so ridiculous. But think about it. Because if you're the hairdresser, you're too busy doing it. You're too busy cutting the hair, working in the business, that you never actually stop to work on the business. But if you're the hairdresser opening up the mechanic workshop, you've got to now find a way. You've got to find a system. You've got to find a process. You've got to find a procedure. You've got to find a method in which you could deliver those mechanical services. And I think that's the key to building a great business.
You mentioned investing in others, including that sandwich shop, for example. People must approach you all the time now. How do you decide what's worth your money and time and energy?
It's very simple. Investing in people with passion. So I started mentioning earlier that I think of the person that I was at 17 years of age. I had the passion. I didn't have the experience, but I certainly had the passion. I'll take passion over experience any day. And what I didn't have was money. Today I have the money, and I have the money available for other people who are passionate. And I will back people who are passionate about the business. And I've made several investments that are running very successfully till today.
Well done. It is all about people, isn't it?
100%. At the end of the day, people are the only item that never appear on your balance sheet, on a company's balance sheet that really should.
Now, you mentioned the person that, actually it was your father who said, you're crazy, you need to get a job. But there's a lot of people in jobs who have a great, they could be a doctor, they could be an architect, they could be in those roles. However, some people are money dumb. As much as that sounds terrible to say, but They could be really, really smart. And is that where Equity Group came from?
Well, it's very interesting because I don't think Equity Group was based on being money dumb. When I think of people being money dumb, I think of Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. I mean, the guy's a genius. His character, he's a genius, but not so smart with money, right? And that's not one of his strong traits. And I think a lot of people are like that. So when we first started our financial planning business, which is Equity Private Wealth, we wanted to do what every other financial planning firm did, and we wanted to go where the money was. Let's go to the high net worth, so people with $10 million plus to invest, because you make a lot more commission on a $10 million sale than you do on a $100,000 one. But what I realised is that every financial planner was targeting the high net worths, and nobody was servicing the average Australian who didn't have $10 million to invest, but just wanted to create a decent plan, have a little bit of financial intelligence so that they can have a comfortable retirement. So we defined wealth, and our definition of wealth became very, very simple, and that's what we built our business on. It was how many days, weeks, months, or years you could live comfortably if you were to stop working. So in other words, if you weren't relying on receiving your pay packet next Wednesday or next Thursday, how long could you live based on what you've already built up? So I built a business around the philosophy of trying to deliver that. And we did that predominantly through property investments. Well, only 3 investments really that we ever recommended. Property investments, investments in the Australian stock market, and a selection of cash investments, depending on their own personal risk profiles. I think all the other stuff, all the fancy stuff, is a little bit too fancy and unnecessary. I think it added additional risk without necessarily any additional reward. But property has been a fantastic vehicle to build long-term wealth.
And was that the base, obviously property, your recognition of how it can create wealth, was that the transition to eventually starting Hudson Homes because you thought, well, I'm investing in that much housing or property, should I be building it as well? What was the attraction?
Okay. I never had the attraction to actually set up a building business, but what I found is that Equity Private Wealth was kind of like a one-stop shop. So we had Equity Private Wealth that did we were licensed financial planners. We did the finance for our customers. We did the SMSF administration. We had Equity Legal that handled all their legal affairs. We had Equity Property, which was the licensed real estate arm. So we kind of handled every single aspect. We even had a funds management division that we still have till today, called Equity Capital Limited, that holds a responsible entity and raises funds to do development projects and so on. So we kind of were a one-stop shop for a customer. But what I found is that the property recommendations we were making were the same crappy investments that every other financial planning firm was recommending. And it wasn't until I attended this, it was actually a funny story because I attended an auction in Gladesville probably 15, 20 years ago. And forgive me, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I'll share the essence of the story with you because I turned up to the auction and I met an old friend of mine that I probably hadn't seen for 3 or 4 years, and he was there with his wife, who I'd never met before, and he had 2 young boys, and we started talking, and I said, "Are you looking at buying this house?" He says, yeah, we're interested in this house. We've had a look at a few, and we kind of like this one. And I asked him, I said, "What's your maximum purchase price?" See, back then we used to tell our clients that you should only invest with your head, not with your heart. Always look at the numbers. Talking about numbers guy. Look at the numbers. Look at the rental yield. Look at the capital growth rate. Look at the population movements. Look at the economics of the area. Numbers, numbers, numbers. And if the numbers add up, great, buy it. But if they don't, magic word, next. Let's look at the next opportunity. But what happened that day changed all that, because he said to me, the most we're going to pay is $750. And I thought it was going to go a little bit more than that. And I said, well, well, good luck. I said, what happens if it gets to 750 and you don't get it? He goes, no, that's our maximum and that's it. And his wife was kind of standing there next to him, arms crossed, thinking, why are you telling him how much we want to pay? And anyway, auction starts, gets to 700, he bids, gets to 710, he bids, gets to 720, gets to 750, he bids. The auction keeps going. And it wasn't until it hit about 770 that I saw him physically take a step back, walk away, and he was out. And what happened next has changed the way we've recommended property ever since. His wife gave him that look. And for every man out there who has a wife, you know exactly the look that I'm talking about. Cut a long story short, he bought the property for 800-something thousand. I can't remember the exact numbers. So at the end of the auction, I went up to him and I said, mate, what happened to your maximum price? And his wife jumped in. And she goes, oh, you don't understand. We've been looking for a house for the past 6 months and this house is perfect for us. It was across the road from this park. The kids could play at the park. And she said one thing to me. She goes, it had this nice outdoor alfresco area. And she mentioned how important that was to her and how important it was that she could now host Easter and Christmas at her house. And at that moment, I thought, everything I've been telling my clients about the numbers, she didn't care about the rental yield. She didn't care about the economic growth in the area. She didn't care about population growth. She wanted to provide the best house she could for her family. And I realized that somebody who pays from the heart will always pay more than somebody that works out the mathematics. So I went out, and at the time, because we recommend properties in New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria. And at the time, this is about 12, 13, actually it's more now, probably 13 years ago, we were recommending Victoria. I remember the number plates on the cars were the place to be, which is an indication of where you should invest, because a few years earlier, it was Victoria on the move, because they're on the move to Queensland and people were investing in Queensland. So I thought, how do I find good quality property in Victoria? So I Google and I find a company called Simmons Homes that were very big, very prominent, and they predominantly sold through display homes. And I saw that they had a couple of their display homes for sale. So I rang up the I can't remember what his role was at the time, but Rhett Simmons, lovely guy, who is the grandson of Gary Simmons, who founded Simmons Homes some 60-odd years ago. And I said, hi, you don't know who I am. My name's Danny. I'm from Equity in Sydney. I've got a couple of clients that want to come and buy some investments. And we flew down. I said, I need you to pick me up from the airport. We'll take him out to the display homes and they'll just buy it on the day. And he goes, yeah, whatever. Sure enough, I flew my client down. He bought the 2 display homes on the day, because that's how we sold property. It was all sold prior to them even deciding which property they wanted to buy, because it was based on fundamentals falling in place with their financial plan, with their long-term goals, with their objectives and so on. So if it fits, it fits. So I built a relationship with Rhett and I said, listen, I've got a great idea. Why don't we start up a new division of Simmons called Simmons Direct, and I'll show you exactly what we do. We went in 50-50. We both invested equally in that at the time. And over a 2-year period, we grew that to about 24 employees, and it started to perform extremely well. About 4 years down the track, they approached me with an offer to buy out my 50%. I was happy with the offer. I accepted it, and I've maintained a great relationship with them ever since. But I developed some technology for them via their online portal that enabled a third-party marketer to access their stock list. It was a very efficient way of doing it. No one had done it at the time. Today, it's quite common. But after they bought out my 50%, I'd signed a 2-year non-compete. And now I kind of feel like the guy that sold his Apple shares for $800, because they went on to list a few years later for $340 million. So I was happy with the deal that we did at the time, and I walked away from that. But 2 years and 2 months, I set up Hudson Homes to do exactly what we did back at Simmons, and I bought that technology back off them for $1. So they sold it to me because they'd stopped using it, and that division kind of fizzled out, and that's how Hudson Homes started.
Wow. Builders go broke all the time, though, and it's why C Business Solutions exists, because Jay helps them with their bottom line, discusses what can be done better when it comes to quoting and keeping the cash flow, those sorts of things. Why has Hudson Homes survived and thrived?
Okay. Hudson Homes was set up initially to thrive and succeed. It was never set up not to be anything but that. And I came across my first challenge when I learned about this thing called homeowner's warranty. And when I first set up my business plan, I thought, well, I need about $60 million in homeowners warranty for my first year of business. Now, that's unheard of in the building industry to get $60 million unless you've been around for at least 5 or 10 years, and you'd probably confirm that, Jay. So I wrote a business plan and I came to apply for my homeowners warranty, and we pitched and we got $60 million in homeowners warranty based on that business plan. So what I had to do now was go out and build a business that was going to deliver on that $60 million. So I actually started the business at first with my brother David. I shared the idea with him. I said, David, I'm thinking about starting a building business. My brother's a builder. I said, why don't you come down to Sydney and we'll get this thing started? And he did. He joined me. He has a strong construction background, not so much an administration background. And I knew that I needed to build the administration side the same way that I'd built Magic Maids. You start with the operational procedures and you build it from there. So the first appointment I made was to find a gun general manager. And I did that in a gentleman named Robert Borg. And I approached Rob Borg. He's been in the industry for a lot longer than I've been in the industry. He's had some senior roles in the industry as well. And I still remember the interview. I sat with him in my office, my equity office, and I said, I want to build this building business. He says, okay, that's great. And one of the questions he asked me, he says, so how many sales do you want to make in your first year? And in my business plan, I'd said 240 sales. He says, wow, that's very ambitious for your first year in building. He says, great. So tell me, how many display homes do you have? I said, oh, well, we don't really have any of them. He says, okay, fair enough. He goes, well, how many salespeople do you have? I said, well, we don't really have any of them either. He goes, in all due respect, son, you're not going to make 240 sales. That year we closed with 248 sales. Because what I understood was this. I understood that I had equity private wealth, and I knew that we delivered 30, 40 properties a month. And if I could divert 50% of them to Hudson Homes, that gave us 20 a month. So Rob Borg took the job, thankfully, because he was very, very instrumental in growing the business in his first 7 years. And the first day he turns up at work, I deliver 2 contracts to his office. 3 days later, another 3 contracts. 2 days after that, a few more contracts. And I still remember him storming into my office with this pile of contracts coming up, and he says, where the hell are all these contracts coming from? I said, well, I explained to you, we've got equity private wealth. So I knew that if we looked after the top line, the bottom line would look after itself. And that's what we focused on when we first built Hudson Homes.
So just on that, so builders typically know building. They know operations to some degree. You having a sales and marketing background or a head that recognises value, and people want to buy value. So do you see that as a significant advantage compared to other builders, and how do they overcome that?
I do. I tell you how. It's that simple example of the hairdresser starting the mechanic workshop. I didn't know how to build a home. I wasn't even a licensed builder. I hadn't done a building course, and I actually got sick of people saying it, that I went to TAFE and I completed both a diploma and an advanced diploma in building. So now I can proudly say that I am a builder, at least on paper. I've never physically built a house. I haven't done much in that department, but I've built a very successful business that delivers 500 plus homes a year.
And this is the thing. So I always say there's 4 significant areas to run a successful building company: sales, marketing. Now, we talked about scheduling, which is more construction and operations. How did you get around the budget versus actual part, as in the estimating part? Was that a simple thing in the beginning?
It was trust. It was trusting in the people that I'd employed. So estimating is such an important part of business, and that's something I learned, especially in the last 2 years, when estimating became an absolutely crucial part of business. And I think that will probably lead you mentioned before that builders go broke. I think estimating is one of the reasons why builders go broke. And if you don't get that part right, so I had to rely a lot on trust. And a lot of it was gut feel. When you understand numbers so well, you can look at something and you can pick any anomalies, anything that doesn't look right or feel right. It's that intuition as well. But I had to rely on the trust of the team that I put together. And we didn't always get it right. I mean, we went through periods where I still remember our first 13 jobs we lost money on. They hadn't allowed for certain things in the construction. It was a flood zone. We didn't know. And you put them down to learning experiences. And you have enough of them, you either go broke or you thrive through it and you learn.
Was there a danger, Danny, that you grew too fast with Hudson? It's one thing to have the equity wealth and the customers that want to buy the houses. Did you even have the people to build all those houses, 248 in the first year?
In the first couple of years, we certainly had our growing pains. I mean, things weren't as efficient as they are today, but we just got through it. We just worked on one little step at a time. I mean, you take the next step and the next step appears, and you take a step after that and the next step appears. But no, I don't recall any major problems.
Wore the cost of the first 13, dealt with that, learnt to estimate better, and just grew.
Basically, yeah. And you'd learn those same lessons every single year. I mean, we got taught lessons in the past 12 months that I don't think any builder ever expected to be taught.
Yeah, and before we talk about that, I just want to the 13 homes that were a loss. Most builders can't handle that. They really can't. And this is where probably home warranty, which is a painful thing for a lot of builders, says you need to have a healthy balance sheet. And you starting with a healthy balance sheet.
We did. We started with a healthy balance sheet. To get my $60 million, I had to put a big chunk of money into the business, put in as paid up capital, and we just wrote a check from equity, and we did that. So one of the challenges in setting up a business is obviously capital. We were fortunate that we had a very successful financial planning business with many other different divisions of it as well, and we made that investment into that.
And having a healthy balance sheet during times like COVID is important. And I'm sure there would have been some interesting times, during COVID, and obviously the output or the outcome of that. Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, COVID was really interesting because when COVID first hit, I sit down and actually I'll go back a few years because this will have some relevance. When we had the global financial crisis, it was 2008 that kind of kicked in. We had a financial planning firm, so the value of our book just dropped nearly a half overnight. And I know how long it takes for economic conditions to recover. And I still remember writing in my diary, we got to do whatever we can to survive till 1.5. I just wanted to make it to 2015. I could see doom and gloom between 11, 12, 13, 14. And in 15, I thought the market's going to really start kicking together. So let's do whatever we need to do to survive till 1.5. And true enough, that's actually what happened. When it came to the COVID, a similar thing happened. So at the beginning of COVID, I sat down and I thought, well, what's likely to happen? Well, we're in lockdown. People won't go to display villages. People won't release land. So sales are going to drop. That was my first instinct. Surprisingly, our sales nearly tripled. The government came out with a $25,000 grant. I can't remember the exact numbers, but something like 40,000 grants were estimated, 125,000 or whatever the number is were actually issued, and all builders were making more sales than we ever thought possible. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I love this COVID thing. Problem is, we then had to build them.
Yeah. Could you keep up?
Well, no, and I don't think anybody could keep up. And the funny thing is, what we sold in 2020, you don't build till 2021, and we sell predominantly on fixed price contracts. And we sell a lot of unregistered land. So developers would develop land and it's not going to register for another 12 months. But sure enough, as land subdivisions go, if you've been in this business long enough, 12 months in development language means about 18 months in yours and mine language, and actually blew out to being much longer than that. So when you've got these fixed price contracts, you've got to honour them. And we started building them in 2021 and all builders were busy. And it became, I'm going to say, the most challenging year that I've ever experienced in 25 years. And all builders are in a similar situation because we all have the same problems. We all use the same trades. We all use the same suppliers. The supply chain got affected. So I call it a three-way triple whammy. So you've got the trade and supply issues. Then you had the weather issues. And the weather just at the beginning of 2022, was it, that we just started with a couple of months of rain. And that continued throughout the year. And the third aspect of it as well was the price increases. So when you put those three elements together, any builder who makes it through this period is going to do well. But I don't think the pain's hit just yet. And I think that most builders are in an okay position now because we're busy. What I'm experiencing today, and what are we, November 2022, the number of people walking through display villages has significantly dropped. The number of sales that the average builder's making, I'm talking about major builders, has significantly dropped. I've had CEOs of some major building companies use the exact words that their sales have fallen off a cliff. So if you think about the effect of that, what we sell this year, we build next year. So if we're not selling much this year and all trades are busy and all suppliers are busy and you've got these massive overheads and your numbers significantly drop next year, then I think the smart builders start planning for that a little bit early. And I think the pain in the building industry, and it breaks my heart to say this, but I think will come in 2023 when the reality really, the proverbial hits the fan.
Typically, builders are very short-sighted. It was great for you to hear, global financial crisis, that 2008, you said, hey, let's get to 2015.
Sorry, interrupt 1 second. You just reminded me how that story is supposed to end, because what I wrote in my diary a year ago was survive till 25. So if you go back to 2015, the market's boomed. Just go back and have a look, and we picked that right. And I think that's not going to happen till 25. So if you look at the time cycle it takes to start developments, build developments. So my motto right now is survive till 25. And I think any builder that makes it to 25 will flourish after that.
And that's my point exactly, because you've set a vision for the future and you're not playing the short game. A lot of builders are short-sighted and they live by year to year. And was that a good financial year? But, by you looking forward allows you to adjust, allows you to maybe reduce your overheads, or allows you to, run a different division, allows you to consolidate or build a balance sheet or whatever it may be, because you're looking ahead. There's plenty that don't, though.
But I don't think they do that by choice, Jay. I think they're in a position where they have no choice but to look at the short term, and maybe because of tight balance sheets. Capital is a very, very important commodity in the building industry. And unfortunately, most builders, as most traders, don't have a significant bank of capital.
And do you think that's because the typical builder wants to save tax and, sort of erode their balance sheet by being a little bit clever? Or do you think it's the industry setting a standard of low margins, so therefore they can't build up a healthy balance sheet? What do you think that is?
I'm really not sure. It could be a combination of both.
Danny, what will you do between now and 2025 to ensure Hudson Homes survives?
Well, we're fortunate that we have the capital that we need to put in. So we can afford to carry losses. We can afford to carry significant losses. Not that we start a business year with the intention of building a loss, but to me it's very, very important that we deliver on our promises. We deliver the homes that we say we're going to deliver. So between now and 2025, it's a case of building our foundation even further. It's about consolidating expenses. It's about reducing expenses in anticipation for a slowdown in the marketplace.
Does that mean losing staff if you have to?
Well, unfortunately, it possibly could.
Yeah. If you're not building, if you're not selling today and you don't need people in 12 months.
So if my business becomes, if my employees take on that role where I need to provide for them, then it's my job as a CEO and my role as a CEO to make sure that I've got a sales pipeline where I don't have to let go of staff. And to me, that's a very, very important part of the mentality behind our medium to long-term objective. Right? My job is to provide, and I've always taken on that. I'm the oldest brother. I've got 2 younger siblings. I've always taken on that role of a provider. Same way I provide for my wife and my family, I want to provide for my employees and my team. And my goal is not to have anybody, and I don't have any plans for mass terminations or mass unemployment. I think it will happen in the building industry, and I think it's the law of the jungle, and the toughest will survive, and the people who produce the best work will continue to thrive in the industry. But my focus, like I said, focus on the top line, and the bottom line will look after itself. So I'm doing whatever I need to do now to make sure I've got a sales pipeline to support the infrastructure that I have. And that's my way of thinking of it. A lot of that's outside my control, market conditions, interest rate increases, and so on. But that just means that you've got to play by a different set of rules. You've got to come up with a different level of creativity. For example, we're launching a new division in Hudson Homes called InvestSmart, which is capitalising on everything that we've learnt at Equity to focus on providing a premium investment choice for mums and dads. And to my knowledge, that hasn't been done in the building industry before, and we're launching that at the beginning of 2023, where I'm training my sales consultants, which we do on a weekly basis and have done so for the past few weeks, on how to think like a, for lack of a better word, a financial advisor, how to think of mathematics when you're selling property, how to show people why these numbers are so important, and using that as a tool to capture a market that is largely neglected by retail builders.
So as approvals decline, they have been since March 2021, And that's been a nice little smoke screen for a lot of people because they felt busy, even though in the background it's been declining. So now when we see a less motivated buyer because of interest rates and, the demand, the sheer demand or the wave of people wanting to, buy houses declines, the fear of missing out is gone. You're introducing new segments or new ways of thinking. How do you also compete against other, sort of home builders of the like, and how do you create that point of difference? I know what you just said is launching a whole new division, but the bulk of your business may not be that too.
Yeah, that's a great question because when I started, we went through a period at Hudson Homes where we kind of lost our way a little bit. We kind of took the eye off the ball. Things were really, really busy, and when things are really busy and you're growing fast, you kind of lose purpose. So I sat down. This was pre-COVID. I sat down and I thought, how do I build Australia's best home building business? It wasn't about building Australia's biggest, but it was about building Australia's best home building business. And I kind of had my Jerry Maguire moment where I was inspired by something, and I went home and I wrote a memo. Instead, for me, it was a 240-page manual, which was called the Hudson Homes Way. And what this did, it divided our business into 7 segments. Everything from people to numbers to the 7 key essential things that I wanted to work on in our business. And I wrote this manual, and the idea was in June 2021, I was going to launch it to the whole company and talk about the new way we're going to build Australia's best home building business. And the motto was very, very simple. We are going to build Australia's best home building business by having the happiest customers. That was it. That was the essence of what it was. That was my Jerry Maguire moment. Now, as I announced the date that we were supposed to all get together, we entered our first serious lockdown. And it wasn't until about 3 months ago, so 12 months later, that I was able to launch the Hudson Homes Way. And we've now launched it in our business, and that looks at every single aspect of our business. For example, the numbers, we have something called a scorecard. So the scorecard is very, very simple. I run this in all my businesses. If I was stuck on a deserted island and I can only receive one sheet of paper or one message, one communication, what would I want to know about Hudson Homes, or what would I want to know about any of the other businesses that I could fit on one sheet of paper? And whatever those numbers are became our scorecard. And we measure them on a weekly basis. We measure them on a quarterly basis. And I think by having a focus that is customer focus will change any builder's ability to grow over the next few years. Reason being, the building business is tough. And we've let clients down, customers down over the past 12 months, not because we lost the ball, but they don't understand how much rain actually delays jobs. If you're waiting on scaffolding from another project to come across and that project's delayed because they can't get their bricks done on time, it delays your project, and there's a massive flow-on effect. We've had price increases that we've had to pass some of them on to our customers, and that's certainly not pleasant. And that's something that I've done personally. I actually rang every single customer myself and apologised and explained the situation. And I remember one customer saying to me, "Danny, this variation you're giving me is the second worst thing you can do to me." I said, "Well, that's interesting." I said, "What's the worst?" He said, "Not giving me a variation and giving me half a house." And I thought how true that was. So having a focus on customers is very important, because there's 150 things that can go wrong when building a house. But it's what a company does when those things go wrong that I think distinguishes one builder from another. And our intentions are good. We instill this in every single one of our staff. I mean, we have a sign in the office in customer service that basically says this: the answer is yes. Now, what was your question? And I think if you're going with that philosophy, and you're going with that mindset, that trickles down from me to every single one of our staff members.
It's interesting you say that, because I quite often get our builders to score their customer service. And I said, but don't score yourself against other builders or our industry. Score yourself against anything you've ever experienced. Because in fairness, the building industry typically isn't great at customer service. We're late, we're expensive, we're poor communicators typically, right? Whereas you compare it to buying a car or going and getting your hair cut, it's all changed. You're getting your coffee, you're getting your head massage, you're getting a beer, you're getting welcomes, you're getting gift packs, you're getting constant, communication. Building typically isn't like that.
Why do you think that is?
Look, I think builders start off on their own, by themselves, and they get busy really quickly with a whole heap of things going on. And I think building's one of the hardest businesses you could ever run.
Do you think it's because we're reliant so heavily on a certain trade base? And maybe that trade base, I mean, we had a commercial division at Hudson's as well that was run completely different to the residential division. You're dealing with a different type of contractor, a different type of trade, and you can build a 20-story building in 2.5 years. Sometimes we struggle to build, a house in 12 months. So there's a significant difference there. So I think the trade base has a lot to do with that, and that's something that I'm working on that I think will revolutionise that.
That's pretty cool. I look at you as a person that I'm inspired by. I've been, a good part of this journey and been able to watch from afar. But tell us about, outside Hudson Homes and outside business. How do you get that balance? We've talked about health and training and things like that, but tell us a bit about the balance.
Well, I'm not an expert on that field. I've got a lot to learn. But as I get older, I'm learning more and more. And I think I've reached a point now where that balance, nothing's better than 2020. You have 2020 vision, hindsight vision. But I wish what I knew today about the balance between work life and health, I knew 10 years ago. Because to me back then it was work. That's all I did. I didn't have anything outside of work. But today I'm trying to I find myself naturally veering towards things that enable me to switch off.
Have you found some of those things?
I found many things. I'm constantly known for having new hobbies.
Aside from the photography?
Yeah, aside from photography, I've done everything from making pens to today it's woodworking. So I find a lot of peace and relaxation in woodworking. I spend a bit of time doing that. I'm watching my YouTube videos. I put my headphones on with the Bluetooth connected to my music, and I just listen to music, and I'll spend maybe a few hours a week doing that. And to me, that's I find that very, very relaxing.
Given how hard you work, do you sleep well? And do you sleep for long?
I do. I don't sleep extremely long. I mean, I used to. I remember one time someone ringing me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I said, "What are you doing ringing me in the middle of the night?" Because I'd go to bed at 3 and wake up at 9. So to me, 6 a.m. was the middle of the night. That was before I was in the building industry. So the building industry starts at 6 a.m. So everything changed when I started the building industry. No, I do sleep well. I put my head down, and within a minute, much to my wife's disappointment, I'm snoring away.
That's good. And it is interesting that you say trying to switch off, because that's the hard part, switching off the brain, having that still moment, where you can relax. And for you to find that's pretty good, because many don't. And so I guess my question to you is that anxiety thing that happens a lot in the world today. Have you ever suffered from anxiety in any way, or you've been quite good?
I haven't. I think I handle stress quite well. I mean, I always say, I don't stress. I'm just concerned about something. So I don't have that mentality of feeling anxiety over an issue. I have a saying in life that basically, when I want to decide how much I need to stress about something, I'll ask myself the question, will this matter in 5 years from now? And I find myself 99.9% of the times, no, it's not going to matter. If I'm running late to this meeting, if I'm losing money on this job, if I've disappointed, will this matter 5 years from now? And if you ask yourself that question, it really puts things in perspective. And like I said, 99.9% of the times, it won't matter 5 years from now. Every now and then something will come up, and you usually find it's something to do with your family. I remember my son had to have an eye operation, and to me, I asked myself that question, will this matter 5 years from now? And the answer was bloody oath. So I took the day off. I did what I had to do because that was important. And I find myself asking that question is a fantastic neutralizer.
You talk about, will things matter in 5 years' time? What does 5 years' time eventually look like for you? 10 years' time, 20 years' time? What's the future look like for you?
Okay, so I've kind of stepped back from well, I shouldn't say full-time role, but I've stepped back from actively managing any of the businesses, and I have a number of different business interests, and I will hire the best people that I can, and I will give them the full responsibility of building that. That doesn't mean I let them do what they want to do or I neglect it. I'm overseeing it. But the day-to-day administration, what I found about myself is I love building businesses, not so much managing them on a day-to-day basis. I'm the kind of guy, and they call me a visionary. I come up with 20 new ideas a week. 15 of them are just crazy, But if out of the 5 decent ideas, one of them works, then that's my role in that business. What does the future hold? Well, I think I'll continue to invest in people with passion. To me, that's a significant thing. But we are working on one thing, and I'll mention this to you now. It's you're probably the first person outside of my office to hear this, so this is newsworthy.
Just letting you know, this does go live.
This does go live. All right. There's something I'm going to launch next year. It's something we've been working on for 2 years. But I remember I received a call from a customer, and this is talking about our trade base, going back to that topic. And the customer said to me, Hudson Homes, you guys are the worst painters. Obviously, the painter contracted we'd used hadn't done a fantastic job on the house. And I said, but listen, we're not. I was trying to explain our role as the builder and so on. And I thought, when are our tradespeople responsible for the work that they do? Because the way the trade base has become, not so much in the commercial world, but in the residential world, is let's just get the job done and move on to the next one. Move on to the next one, not really care about it. But what if there was a way that we could change that? What if the way that we could make our tradespeople passionate about the work they do the same way they were 20, 30 years ago? And that made me think of, well, what's the role of the builder? Because the builder's role is to supervise that. I'm sure many builders have had customers come up to them and say, you know what, we could do a better job than you. And when you really think about it, I think a customer with a little bit of knowledge, with a little bit of guidance, could probably do a better job than a builder who's looking after 300 homes, right? So I thought, well, how can we remove the builder from the equation? And we came up with this concept called Build Buddy. And Build Buddy is a software application that we've been working on for the past 2 years. We've got 15 full-time developers working on that. And when I first looked at it, I took every single step that we took in the building industry, and it was 389 steps to build a single-story home. And I thought, oh, this is too hard. And I folded it down, I put it away, and I let it go. And I pulled it out at the beginning of COVID, and I thought, well, what if we just start working on one step at a time? So I put a team of programmers together, and we started working on this software. And 2 years later, I reckon we're about to launch it in the new year. And what this software will do is it will enable any mum or dad to build their own home without a builder, which means they're going to save 20 to 25% of the cost of building their home off the bracket. But most of them don't have the confidence to know what to do next. So we used AI intelligence that will enable us to take a set of floor plans, and it will map out the workflow and send it to your mobile phone and tell you exactly what you need to do. So imagine this. You have a block of land. You type in the address for the block of land. We're instantly connected with every single council in Australia, America, and Canada. And it will tell you instantly which one of my floor plans would fit on that home and become compliant. It'll also tell you how much it will cost to build that home if you do this or if you do that based on the levels. Let's say you don't want one of our standard floor plans. Then you say, I want to find a local architect. So you search local architect via the app, and there's two parts to the app. There's Build Buddy, which is for the customer, and then Trade Buddy, which is for your trades and suppliers. So you're a local architect, you subscribe to Trade Buddy, you get a notification exclusively from Build Buddy saying Mr. and Mrs. Jones would like a quote on designing their home. Now, the architect could be in the Philippines, could be in America, could be anywhere. As long as they know the rules and regulations, they'll come up with a quote. So this, for the first time, enables the customer to negotiate directly with every single tradesperson that they want to employ to build their home.
It's a new take on the owner-builder.
It is a new take on the owner-builder. They actually do need to get an owner's-builder's license to make this work, but they're not doing it on their own because we give them two buddies. We give them a pre-construction buddy, which is typically someone like an administration person working out of the office that will take them through from the initial concept design right up to being site ready. And then they have their construction buddy, which essentially is a site supervisor that will go out on site for them every single day, and he'll charge them a fee. And how do you choose your construction buddy? Well, it's based on their rating. It's based on their quote. So you're going to see someone's 3-star rating is charging you $8,000, but they've got a couple of bad reviews. Then you've got this guy, his name's Mark, he's a great supervisor, he's got a 5-star review, but he's going to charge you $10,000, and you go with him. So you decide every single trade that builds your home, but you're guided by the workflow management in this app. And to me, I think that's going to change the way the building industry is going to operate in the future. And we've set it up so it's instantly accessible in Australia, America, and in Canada. And I've been working on that for the past 2 years.
Wow. All from starting with a manual for cleaning houses. You're clearly born an entrepreneur. You are a great businessman. Luck or hard work?
That's always a great question. I'm going to have to split it down the middle, 50-50. I mean, I've certainly been very, very lucky, but I always find that the harder I work, the luckier I seem to get.
We've been lucky to have you on the podcast. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.